Good afternoon and welcome to the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor. Committee Secretary, will you please take roll?
Assembly members Anderson, Carter, Cole, Hardy, Howdigi, Kasama, Miller,
Here.
Monroe Moreno, O'Neill, Roth, Torres Fawcett, Yeager, Urick, Chair Marzola.
Here. Welcome everyone who is with us in Carson City, those joining us in Las Vegas, and anyone tuning over the internet. Today we will hear three bills: Assembly Bill 44, Assembly Bill 52, and Assembly Bill 270. I will be taking those in order. Before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping announcements. Members of the public may provide testimony in various ways, all of which are listed in the agenda. When testifying, please remember to turn on the microphone to speak and off to listen. Also remember to state and spell your name for the record. Committee information is available on the legislature's website. You may also watch our meeting through the legislature YouTube channel. We ask that public comment be kept to 2 minutes so that everyone can be accommodated today. I expect courtesy and respect in all our interactions, as always. And finally, please remember to turn off or silence all of your electronic devices, especially your cell phones. And with that, we will move to our first agenda item. I will now open the hearing on Assembly Bill 44. This measure prohibits manipulating the price of an essential good or service in the state. Welcome, Attorney General Ford. You may begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Marzola and members of the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor. My name is Aaron Ford, A-A-R-O-N, last name F-O-R-D, and I am your Attorney General. We are here today, this afternoon, to present Assembly Bill 44. To my right, Mark Kruger, who is the head of my Consumer Protection Bureau, is with me to help present this bill, and to my left is our consumer advocate, Ernest Figueroa, who will likewise be here to assist in the presentation. In the audience as well are several members of my staff, and I wanted to acknowledge them as well. As I've said many times before, my administration is driven by one job. And you've heard us say it before, our job is justice. And we focus on justice through 5 core values known as the 5 C's. One of those C's is consumer protection. AB 44 falls within the expansive effort of my office to perform its consumer protection duties. This work requires constant monitoring and attention due to the shifting issues that are facing consumers today. The need for this piece of legislation stems from the fact that more than residents of any other state, Nevadans unfortunately struggle to afford essential goods due to factors that include our consistently high unemployment rate, the current number of Medicaid recipients, and potential cuts to Medicaid and other social safety net programs at the federal level. For example, Nevada has the unfortunate distinction of having the worst unemployment rate in the nation. In December of 2024, Nevada's unemployment rate was 5.7% for the 3rd consecutive month, the highest unemployment rate in Nevada since September of 2021. At the end of 2024, 1 out of every 4 of our constituents, nearly 788,000 Nevadans, were enrolled in the state's Medicaid program. This statistic is even more troubling based on the information you've received during the hearing last week that Nevada could be at risk of losing $1.9 billion in federal Medicaid funding if Congress follows through with planned reductions to Medicaid spending, putting both the health and financial livelihoods of so many Nevadans at risk. As your Attorney General, I have witnessed that during difficult times, cheaters and scammers will use unfair practices to take advantage of the tough economic circumstances that Nevadans are experiencing. Remember the housing crash and the proliferation of mortgage fraud that ensued? My office investigates and prosecutes those types of unfair practices. And this bill would fill current holes in statutes that have proven insufficient to stop these practices from occurring. Consider, if you will, the rancher in Lyon County who depends on a fair price of grain and gas to operate his small farming business, or the parents in Reno who are both working multiple jobs to simply afford the rising costs of meat and bread at the grocery store just to feed their family. Or even consider the single mother in North Las Vegas who is being forced to make decisions between the rising costs of her own medications and the increases in her rent. No matter where you live in Nevada, we all share the same vulnerabilities, and I want to ensure you that as your Attorney General, these consumers are protected in the marketplace. If you couple those statistics with the rising cost of all types of goods and services, it is easy to see why so many Nevadans struggle to afford the essential goods that are necessary to care for themselves and their families. The cost of essential goods such as food, clothing, gasoline, medicine, housing, household utilities, ground transportation, and phone and internet access should not be a barrier to Nevadans assessing these goods. As well, increased costs of doing business cannot be used as a smokescreen for businesses who fraudulently or deceptively manipulate. Key phrases we'll turn back to: fraudulent and manipulative and deceptive manipulations of the marketplace by increasing prices to the detriment of Nevadans. Let me be clear on this last point. This bill does not prohibit companies from setting prices in a manner that reflects the basic forces of supply and demand. Let me repeat that, because you will hear others say otherwise. This bill does not prohibit companies from setting prices in a manner that reflects the basic forces of supply and demand. By the way, that phrase is actually a defined term in federal courts, and that's going to be explained a bit later in this presentation. I'd also like to take this opportunity to dispel a notion that this bill is meant to, and I quote, punish businesses. Let's put that confusion to rest as well. Increased costs to businesses due to inflation, due to supply chain disruptions, or rising operating costs are all basic forces of supply and demand. This bill does not prohibit those practices. It does not cripple small business owners who are good corporate citizens and work hard to earn a living themselves. Nor does it kill competition. To the contrary, it's called the Unfair Trade Practices Act. By its name, it seeks to promote fair competition and a robust economy, which in turn allows consumers to have more choices and lower prices in the long term. Also, this is not a price gouging bill. It is a price fixing bill. What this bill does is prohibit those who would, and here are some key phrases, knowingly manipulate. I'm sorry, I hurt my finger, guys, so I don't mean to look crazy. That would knowingly manipulate the market through fraudulent and deceptive means to increase prices of essential goods and essential services beyond the threshold that is set in this legislation, ensuring that the already high costs of essential goods and services are not pushed even further out of reach for illicit gains. This bill addresses price fixing and provides a mechanism for my Consumer Protection Bureau to use the Unfair Trade Practices Act to investigate and to prosecute those bad actors who would further prey on Nevadans. It allows investigations into those businesses who would attempt to further injure competition and consumers through deceptive and fraudulent means. Through deceptive and fraudulent means. If you're not being deceptive, if you're not being fraudulent, this bill would not apply to you. But if you are using deceptive and fraudulent means to manipulate the price of necessities beyond those basic forces of supply and demand, this bill speaks directly to your activities. Unfair trade practices hurt honest businesses that are fighting for their survival in this economy. It is enough that they have to navigate these difficult times without having to compete with those businesses that are unfairly trying to manipulate the market. This is a bill to promote fair competition and prevent consumers from further being taken advantage of by those who would knowingly do so through fraud and deception. The committee will note that my office has submitted a proposed amendment to this bill. Since the submission of the amendment yesterday, we've actually had continued discussions with several stakeholders, and we will be submitting an updated amendment, Madam Chairwoman, for your consideration at the conclusion of this hearing. I also want to note that my office, as it has always done, has maintained an open door. We've had a stakeholder meeting already and several other meetings in the meantime, and we'll continue to have an open door to stakeholders who want to sit with us and work in good faith to pursue something that is going to protect our consumers from deceptive and fraudulent activities that manipulate the marketplace. And with that, Chair Mazzola, I'll turn over our presentation to Mark Kruger in my office to explain the substantive points of Assembly Bill 44 and my office's proposed amendment.
Thank you, General Ford. My name is Mark Kruger, M-A-R-K, last name K-R-U-E-G-E-R. I'm a Chief Deputy Attorney General under the Attorney General's Office, Bureau of Consumer Protection. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee for having us here today. General Ford actually hit on the highlights that I was going to go over, which is that we are amending the Unfair Trade Practices, Chapter 598A of NRS, and specifically adding another provision under 598A.060, which does exactly what General Ford says, prohibits the manipulation of prices of essential goods and services. Now, that's further defined a little bit by explaining that that manipulation is when a person knowingly engages in a fraudulent or deceptive conduct in the state to cause essential goods and services to be manipulated and increased in a manner that does not reflect the basic forces of supply and demand. What we mean by that is essentially what the courts have declared as manipulation is anything over whatever it takes for above and beyond normal forces of supply and demand. In addition, we've added a further explanation about what it means to have any goods or services in the bill, and we provide that those goods or services are needed on a daily or reoccurring basis for the livelihood of a person, including without limitation. And we took categories that we felt were important for people to make basic needs, essential needs to live. And these categories come from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and we specifically looked to the state of Nevada's personal consumption expenditures by type of product. So the categories are actually set by the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and it demonstrates over each year how much was spent by consumers in that particular state here in Nevada for that particular year. And it lags about a year behind, and we thought the best way to analyze this was over a 5-year look back. Take 5 years, take the average, and set that as the dollar amount that would be the threshold. With that, I will happily take any questions.
Thank you for your presentation today. I do have a couple questions, but I'll take questions from members first. Committee members, are there any questions? We'll start with Assembly Member Carter.
Yes, what I was curious about is what is the definition of a public utility as defined in the amendment? Because it includes public utilities.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Chair, to Assemblyman Carter.
You can go direct.
Thank you. Assemblyman Carter, thank you for your question. Mark Kruger for the record. So utilities are any, there is an exemption in 598 for regulated utilities that manage to set prices, and the utilities have to go through a process. In our case, the Public Utilities Commission is generally that utility that sets it. However, there are some local utilities as well. So any utility would be what provides basic services for a person to live. So electric, gas, those types of services.
Thank you. And that's where I was getting at. Public utility, you just named gas and electric, and, like in Clark County and in Washoe County, those are under the PUC and they're regulated. Are they specifically excluded the ones that fall under the PUC, or just trying to understand?
Mark Kruger for the record, yes. The exclusion is for regulated utilities under either federal, state, or local regulations. So the PUCN, for example, would regulate many utilities in this state. There are some local jurisdictions that also regulate, so like water, for example. And it's regulation as to pricing.
Speaker Yeager.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Attorney General, for being here. Question I have, it specifically related to this, but I think the same question could be applied to everything that's a deceptive trade practice. And the question is, how do you anticipate you would tackle this issue? Would you wait to get consumer complaints? Would you be doing sort of proactive enforcement to try to figure out what's going on there in the marketplace? So just if you could touch a little bit about that enforcement mechanism and how your office is going to learn about these things.
Thank you very much, Speaker Yeager. Aaron Ford for the record. It's a combination of all of those you've already highlighted. Sometimes you get extra complaints from constituents, and we can respond to those after investigating it. Sometimes we learn of things through coordination and cooperation that we have with other, for example, attorneys general across the nation. I will say to you that the impetus behind this bill, frankly, arose out of the housing context, where we learned of rental prices being increased by virtue of some unfair and illegal price-fixing tactics. And we learned about that through not only complaints from our constituents, but also from other attorneys general who are prosecuting agencies and entities that are engaging in that practice. Now, let me be clear, because I know some ask the question, why do you need this particular bill if you have other types of bills that you can utilize? And what I will say is this: we want to specifically outlaw this form of price fixing. It's similar to, for example, fraud. Fraud is a general proposition, but fraud against an elder is a specific proposition. So while we have the general approach to unfair practices, we want a specific approach to unfair practices that deal with essential services, such as housing and others. But that's a bit off of the, that's a bit of a tangent from your question, but I wanted to highlight that because I anticipate that as a question coming. But the way we usually hear about these are word of mouth complaints or working with other colleagues across the nation.
Assemblymember Hardy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here to have this discussion. And so, as a former small business owner, I just kind of want to understand, if we don't want to penalize businesses and business owners that are, having to raise prices legitimately, like for instance, sometimes we would have to raise our prices because our rent went way up, or our products increased substantially and things like that. So maybe could you give me an example of what would be considered price fixing, like in that instance, where we would be, a business owner would be knowingly manipulating something? Because I wouldn't want to see, good business operators getting punished and breaking the law when they really are, having to legitimately raise prices. So if you could just kind of maybe give me some examples of what would not be considered and then what would be considered fraudulent according to your bill here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney General Aaron Ford. For the record, Assemblymember Hardy, thank you for that question. What I can say at the outset is what you've just described sounds like a basic force of supply and demand to me. You responding to an increase in pricing because prices are increasing. The threshold question for this bill is whether there has been fraudulent, knowingly fraudulent activity, i.e., let's say the small business owner has a rate increase from his or her its landlord, but it was the landlord that worked with other landlords to determine how much these increases were going to be. Irrespective of the fact that the market wouldn't necessarily bear it, but because they were determining that they were going to decide among themselves how much they were going to increase your rent. That, in and of itself, might fall within the bill, but you raising your prices because of your rent increase would not. Does that make sense? And I will also offer my colleague Mark an opportunity to add in as well.
Thank you, Mark Kruger, for the record. Assemblymember Hardy, the question also raises the issue of whether or not we can anticipate what that manipulation is going to look like. And honestly, with the advance of technology, AI, and everything else, we don't necessarily know what it's going to look like at this point. But when we do, we'll be able to address it at that time. So I don't have an example at the top of my head other than what General Ford just gave you. So you could use AI to manipulate the market and, you know, do it yourself or in conspiracy with another group of people, and then those essential goods and services are going up and they're artificially inflated above what supply and demand would have increased. I don't know that I provided much more clarity to your question, but I attempted to do so.
Assemblymember Kasama.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Attorney General. The question that I have here deals with kind of the language where we have manipulates or intentionally engages. It just seems to me there's still a lot of subjectivity with those type words. And who is deciding that these that this would be a use of manipulation or intentionally engages? Is it you yourself? Is it staff people? Is it a committee that decides that this has become fraudulent practice, intentionally engaging in fraudulent behavior? Do you have people from different industries that would weigh in on this? How would you define that? I'm just concerned it's still very subjective.
Aaron Ford, for the record, thank you so much, Assemblymember Kasama. There is a deceptive, in the first instance, let me ensure that you are looking at the amendment. It is not an intentional engaging in, it's a knowing engaging in. So we want to be certain that you're looking at the right version in that regard. But the ways in which we determine whether entities or individuals are violating the deceptive trade practice is through utilizing well-established deceptive trade practice standards. It's an investigation. We ask questions, we get responses, we analyze those responses, and we determine if the discovery, which is a term of art on the one hand, but also a term that can be used quite liberally here, if the discovery is that you have indeed worked with others to artificially inflate the pricing of an essential good or service, and that could constitute a knowing activity. But again, what I want to do is allow my colleagues an opportunity to chime in that regard and offer any additional commentary.
Mark Kruger, for the record, and the general is absolutely correct. The Deceptive Trade Practices Act is 598A, unfair trade practices is 598. 598, unfair trade practices is 598A. In the Deceptive Trade Practices Act, the standard is a knowing standard, which has had some Supreme Court interpretation, so there is case law out there. So we use that standard, and it utilizes deception and fraudulent acts, and we've worked on these types of cases. We're just using that standard in the Unfair Trade Practices Act to prove up the manipulation. So we would conduct the investigation just like General Ford explained.
Follow-up, Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
You say you're operating using the Unfair Trade Practices Act or the Deceptive Trade Practices Act. Has those chapters or those regulations not given you enough teeth to convict people of this? It seems like we already have this in statute. I'm still concerned as to why we need this addition.
Thank you very much for the question, Aaron Ford, for the record. I anticipated the question, which is why I alluded to it when Speaker Yeager mentioned it in the first instance. Again, I reference the analogy of having a general fraud statute and a fraud statute that disallows fraud against an elder. We want a specific statute that addresses price fixing and essential goods and services, not just a generalized price fixing statute that can be utilized toward anything and everything. And so at the end of the day, the types of complaints that we're getting are specific enough to where we believe that essential goods and services should be protected by a specific law that outlaws the price fixing of those types of goods and services.
Assemblymember Miller. Assemblymember Torres Fawcett.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. I think in your presentation, you were alluded to a couple of the emergencies, in which case we've had difficulty accessing some of the items that are addressed, at least with the amendment. And I'm just wondering if the intent of this legislation then will go beyond just when there is a declared state of emergency. So when would this piece of legislation be able to be used?
Aaron Ford for the record. Thank you for the question. This statute is not limited by a declaration of a state of emergency. That's different from, for example, what we did last session where we brought forth a price gouging bill that only applied during the declared states of emergency. That is not the limitation we placed on this bill. It should be able to, in our estimation, be utilized to protect consumers at any point when we uncover and discover that entities or individuals are knowingly participating in fraudulent activity that is artificially increasing the pricing of essential goods and services.
Assemblymember Cole.
Thank you very much. So my question is this, the way that I'm reading it, I'm looking at the language in the proposed amendment, is that a person can act alone or in concert with others. So my concern would be that a business owner acting alone determines that they would like to make more profit because perhaps they would like to retire someday or send their 2 children to college. And so they intentionally, knowingly, raise their prices. That is part of the definition of the basic supply, right? And supply and demand. So to me, that would sweep this person up because it's artificial in some way.
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Cole. Mark Kruger for the record. It's important to remember the first part of the intent of the bill, which is that they have to knowingly, through deception and fraud, raise those prices. They want to raise the prices, go ahead. It doesn't prohibit it.
Assemblymember O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. I want to lay a foundation of my question first, if I may, Chair. Did a little research, and various experts across the nation, such as Clifford Winston from the Brookings Institute, Harvard economist and policy professor, former Obama administrator, economist Jason Furman, Douglas Holtz Eakin, president of Learning of American Action Forum, and several others have all made negative statements about investigations of price frauding. So here's my question. In the various debates about price gouging measures, we've heard many states and these individuals themselves, along with others, that penalizing businesses for responding to market conditions could reduce supply and drive up costs. How would you respond to that statement or that question, sir?
Aaron Ford for the record. Assemblymember O'Neill, I'm not quite sure I understood what you said at the very end. You were citing...
I'll repeat it.
Please do. You were citing a lot of people, but I didn't get the point you were making.
In debates about price gouging measurements or
Price gouging?
measures...
This is not a price gouging bill, so those analyses would not apply to what we're talking about here, which is price fixing.
Can I have the definition then, please, of...
And can one person talk at a time, please?
Yes,
I'm sorry,
ma'am.
Chair.
Apologies.
Thank you.
My fault. Give me the definition of fraudulent and deceptive conduct, because the prior statement by my colleague about one person raising their prices to just make more profit, I think we agreed is not price gouging. But that same person, how do we define if it is price gouging in a world? So give me some definitions then on that, please.
Mark Kruger for the record. Thank you, Assemblymember O'Neill, for the question. So to be clear, we don't want to convert or twist a lot of these topics. Price gouging is different. This is price fixing. I've not read and I'm not familiar with the experts that you cited to, but we certainly can take a look at that, and I'm fairly certain that some of what they're talking about is potentially looking at price gouging, which is very much distinguishable from our price fixing. If the experts are talking about unfair trade practices, well, the Sherman Act and the federal level and the Clayton Act have been around for a long time, and there's a lot of theories about whether or not they're effective or not. In addition to the Unfair Trade Practices Act in Nevada law, which has been around quite some time. As General Ford said earlier, we are looking to give another tool in our long list of ways in which people or businesses have manipulated the market by specifically targeting essential goods and services. Essential goods and services, as General Ford said in his opening comments, have risen, and sure, some of those increases are from basics, supply and demand, but other reasons, which we are trying to prevent, are through fraudulent actors taking advantage of consumers. So this would be another tool to allow us to go after those actors who would manipulate the market in that way. And I hope that answers your question, but again, without seeing much of the experts' statements that you've mentioned and cited to, it's hard to be able to cognizantly address every point.
I'll be happy to share them with you. I appreciate the time. I still think there's a very loose definition that could entrap well-intentioned individuals, but I appreciate the time, and thank you, Chair.
Committee members, any additional questions? No. I don't see any. I do have a question, probably more for my clarity than anything. So can we go back to section 1, subsection 3A? So let's start with 3. So 598A exempts regulated utilities. Am I correct on that?
Mark Kruger, for the record, you are correct, Chair. It exempts regulated utilities that regulate the price of goods or services.
Okay. So then when we go down to 3A, where you have household utilities, can you give me some examples? Because I can't think of any. It could just be me that are not regulated.
Mark Kruger, for the record, there may be some in the rurals that are not regulated. I don't have that information at the top of my head. However, it's important to also keep in mind that this legislation is prospective. So, for example, at one time we had question 3 that sought to deregulate electricity. So if there were another bill or another piece of legislation that deregulated electricity, then those would fall into something that wasn't otherwise exempt. So I hope that helps to answer your question.
It does. So it's more of a safety measure.
Mark Kruger, for the record. In some manner of speaking, yes, but if there are unregulated utilities that do offer essential goods and services, it would cover those.
If I could as well, Aaron Ford, for the record, just an example for our purposes is that the telecommunications arena deregulated themselves 15 years ago or so, 2007. And so what Mark has given you an example of, it's not beyond the pale of imagination that an entity that right now is regulated may no longer be regulated on a going forward basis, and they constitute a good or service that should not be, that would fall within the purview of this particular bill.
Thank you for that clarification. Committee members, any questions? I don't see any. So I'll give you. We will start with testimony in support to Assembly Bill 44. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in support? Please remember to state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Chair, members of the committee, Jonathan Norman, Jonathan, Norman, Nevada Coalition of Legal Service Providers. We appreciate this bill. When I, just looking at the amendment, the words that stand out: manipulate, knowingly engages in fraudulent or deceptive conduct intended and does cause the price of an essential good or service in the state to increase. So this is about scammers trying to fleece Nevadans. And when I think of the consumers we see, the people we see coming into our offices, they almost uniformly, no matter the issue, have been had economic harm happen to them. And I appreciate any bill that stands up for those consumers. And so I urge your support of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Carson City wishing to testify in support? Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in support to Assembly Bill 44? Broadcast, is there anyone on the line?
Chair, the public lines are open and working, but there are no callers to testify in support at this time.
We will move to testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 44. We will start with Carson City. Please remember to state and spell your name for the record. You each will have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Paul Maratkin with the Vegas Chamber. The Chamber is opposed to AB 44. The Chamber, of course, does not agree to price manipulations or unfair trade practices. However, too many of our sectors on the Chamber's membership have concerns about the original draft of AB 44 and the proposed amendment that's currently on notice by the Attorney General's office. We believe that the language in the amendment is still too broad for definition of essential goods, is subjective, and the usage of the personal consumption expenditure definition also has caused concerns within the membership. And also the Chamber also has concerns about how we are able to address those concerns with the current market conditions which are beyond our control. We do, of course, want to thank the AG and his office for the open door communication, and we look forward to the next reversion of the amendment that he referred to after this hearing. Thank you very much, Chair.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Brian Wachter, Senior Vice President of the Retail Association of Nevada, WACHTER. We are opposed to AB 44. We share some of the concerns that we heard during the presentation from some of the committee members, that a single individual retailer would have difficulty or would be put under an immense amount of scrutiny should they decide to raise their prices for whatever their own particular reasons are for raising their prices. We view this bill not so much as an additional tool in the Attorney General's toolbox. As you can see from the original version of the bill and what's currently in law, price fixing is already currently illegal, along with 14, 15, 16 other versions of price fixing already illegal. What we are more worried about is this is more of a government price control. This will cause some economic problems for retailers as they are attempting to figure out where in the marketplace that they want to be. I'm sure as consumers, none of us would want to purchase a pineapple, say for $20 from a store who was selling one. That would probably be a bad business decision. The true course of supply and demand that the Attorney General was talking about would very clearly put that pineapple salesman out of business. But we do think it is an overreach for the government to suggest that a 5-year look back on prices is the cap for what a retailer can ultimately charge for their goods. We do appreciate being a part of the working group with the Attorney General's office. I will say I do not believe that there's an amendment that we're going to be able to come to that would remove our opposition, but we do look forward to reading the new amendment that is presented from the Attorney General this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Josh Hicks with McDonald Carano. I'm here on behalf of the Nevada Home Builders Association. We submitted a letter for the record as well, but I did want to make just a few comments. The Nevada Home Builders Association is a statewide advocacy organization for the home building industry. It's composed of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association and the Builders Association of Northern Nevada. And our concerns on this bill are limited to the impacts it has on housing, and particularly the rental housing market, which many of our members build. And more specifically, the concern deals with litigation threats, litigation exposure, and what that means for the housing market. I think one thing that's very important for this committee to note is that this is not the Attorney General has primary jurisdiction over this kind of bill and this kind of prosecution. But 598A also includes a private right of action. So that means any kind of plaintiff or private party can also bring litigation. And that issue is a real one for the home builders. Litigation, I think any of us who've been involved with it know that even when you win litigation, you can lose it. The cost, the delays, they can increase the cost of housing. They can completely kill housing projects. So it's that level of concern of exposure to litigation that drives our opposition to this bill and the ultimate impacts on housing supply and housing costs. And so we stand opposed to the bill for those reasons. Thank you.
Chair Marzola, Vice Chair Howdegate, Mackenzie Warren Kay with Brownstein, WARRENKAY. Sticking in the housing realm, here in opposition on behalf of 4 housing clients, the Nevada Multifamily Alliance, American Homes for Rent, Ovation Development, and Main Street Renewal, which is a property management company that's owned by the Amherst Group. There are 4 letters of opposition that I would direct you members to take some time to read, posted on Nellis, but I'll just pull a few highlights here. Specifically, we view the language in proposed section 1 sub 3 as an attempt to coerce industry to limit price increases on essential goods and services in housing by threat of potential legal action. While the amendment provides some clarity on what is an essential good and service, our core concern is that that dollar amount for a monthly and annual increase is unworkable in AB 44 in its proposed amendment. And I think one of the most harmful aspects of AB 44 is that it fails to consider the economic forces that may drastically impact that 5-year average. Do want to acknowledge the Attorney General for putting together the stakeholder group. We'll continue to be at the table with him and review the amendment, but we are in opposition today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Miranda Hoover with 3C House, representing the Energy and Convenience Association of Nevada. We appreciate the sponsor of this bill for meeting with us and allowing us to also be part of the stakeholder group. At this moment, without seeing the Second Amendment, we are in strong opposition to AB 44. The manipulation of price provision, while it mentions fraudulent or deceptive conduct, really will make normal, everyday market activity legally suspect. It essentially says that raising prices for any reason could bring legal action and result in potential liability. That should not be the case. While under this language, cost increases to the business might be a defense, that is far from certain. In the amendment, for example, if costs go up faster in a given year than they have in the previous 5 years, every retailer selling motor fuel could be at risk of legal action and liability. Of course, we know this will happen as energy prices are volatile. Retailers are price takers on the vast majority of the price of motor fuel. But before this underlying bill and the amendment put those retailers at significant legal risk whenever there is a development in the Middle East or some other world event that increases the cost of oil. I would also note that nothing in the amendment actually ties the price increase to the specific retailer's cost over the past 5 years. For example, a smaller retailer that often purchases at a higher price point would be at a built-in disadvantage on the generalized measure of prices over the past 5 years that have the amendment language creates. The same will be true at different times based on whether a retailer is branded or unbranded and the terms of their supply contracts. Some retailers will be advantaged and others disadvantaged based on an overall 5-year average figure, especially if you take into account the last 5 years as an average, which includes the pandemic. The bottom line is that this creates uncertainty for all businesses who would be affected by this change. States that have provisions of law relating to price gouging typically only have them apply during a declared emergency and make clear exemptions for cost increases and the like. This language would be unlimited as to time and would penalize single, independent businesses making their own business judgments. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. For the record, Trey Abney, representing the members of NFIB, small business owners throughout the state of Nevada. I will just give a me too to all the comments that have been made before. We are worried about the nebulousness of this bill, and certainly concerned that we're not worried about my friend A.G. Ford, what he will do to our businesses, but this will affect any future Attorney General and future Nevadans and small businesses. And we think that there are plenty of laws already in place to deal with what we're trying to talk about today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon, Chair Marzola and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Omar Salcedo, and I'm appearing here today on behalf of AT&T. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on AB 44. First, I want to thank the Attorney General's office for working with us on this bill. After several conversations and per the rules of the committee, we are here testifying in opposition to the bill. We appreciate the goal to protect Nevada consumers. However, our industry's conduct is regulated via the Federal Communication Commission, known as the FCC, who oversees telecommunication services and broadband services, both fixed and wireless across the nation. We hope to be able to continue to work with the bill sponsor to alleviate our language concern as it moves forward through the legislative process. In closing, we also support the comments made by CTIA, who is our industry trade association, who sent in a letter of opposition for your consideration. This completes my testimony. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Helen Foley, and I represent T-Mobile. I have Verizon on one side of me and AT&T on the other, and I can't tell you a more competitive, cutthroat business than telecommunications. If you have seen any of our ads, if you drop your phone, you can go right over to one of our competitors and get 4 free phones. You've seen it all. You've seen it all. There are very exciting things happening with the telecommunications industry. We are already regulated by the federal government, and we think that the prices have stayed as low as they possibly can, but they may get lower. And that's because we want your business, and we want to compete with the others in the market. And we do not believe, it recognizes that we are under a federal authority, but then it includes us again as telecommunication providers later on. We would like to be excluded from that list. If you do that, we wouldn't have a problem with the bill at all. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Chair Marzola and members of the committee. For the record, Donna Laffey with Ferrari Reader Public Affairs here on behalf of Verizon. While not as colorful as Helen, I would like to echo some of the comments of AT&T and T-Mobile, and also the comments made in the letter submitted by CTIA. We appreciate the intent of the bill. Consumer protection is important to us, and we appreciate the willingness of the Attorney General's office to work with the telecommunications industry, but we do not believe the most recent amendment addresses our concerns, nor does it provide regulatory clarity, as we are heavily regulated under the federal level by the FCC. So we would like to continue to work with the bill sponsor to get to a neutral stance, but at this point, we are in opposition to AB 44. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Marzola and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Azim Jessa, A-Z-I-M-J-E-S-S-A, and I'm the chair of the Legislative Committee for the Nevada Realtors. The Nevada Realtors are opposed to AB 44 due to its potential to impose rent control in Nevada. By restricting how landlords can adjust rents, this bill discourages investment and the improvement of housing, reduces housing availability, and will lead to declining property maintenance. Rent control policies create housing shortages and make it harder for renters to find quality housing. Thank you for the time today.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, for the record, John Sandy, John-Sande, here today on behalf of the Nevada State Apartment Association. I think I've reached the point of Me Too's. I think there's been a lot of really great points that have been made. And just wanted to also kind of add or point out that I think a small business really, in order to feel completely certain when raising prices, would probably have to hire an economist to do so. And I think this is, in light of the number of laws that are out there already preventing this type of conduct, I think this is a little overreach. So thank you.
Chair Marzola and members of the committee, my name is Tomas Hammond, T-O-M-A-S-H-A-M-M-O-N-D, with Carrera, Nevada, here on behalf of the National Home Rental Council. The National Home Rental Council is opposed to AB 44 and has concerns about the bill indirectly implementing rent control. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Victoria Supple for the record, VICTORIA from Argentum Partners. I'm here on behalf of the Nevada Builders Alliance. The Nevada Builders Alliance is the largest statewide professional organization representing the development and business industry. NBA advocates on behalf of nearly 1,200 member organizations to protect their interests and address issues affecting builders and developers. Housing availability and attainability has been a statewide priority for our members and many others. We oppose AB 44 as it will exacerbate the hardships Nevadans are facing when it comes to housing. Not only will the effects of this bill limit the availability of housing of all types, but will deter more builders from coming to Nevada that will have ripple effects on the state in various facets. NBA stands in opposition to the bill currently, but would like to continue to work with the sponsor and this committee to find a solution to incentivize housing development in Nevada.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Andrew McKay. I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Franchise Auto Dealers Association. We're in opposition to the bill as drafted. I want to acknowledge the work that Attorney General Ford and his team have put in the working group. Assuming that those amendments are adopted by this esteemed committee, we in fact will move to the neutral position, but as drafted, I guess you could say we're in tepid opposition, but since I have 2 minutes, I want to steal a couple minutes and challenge Ms. Foley. I would argue that we're arguably the most competitive industry out there. I say we are truly the last bastion of capitalism. My dealers compete against the dealer next door, the dealer down the street, the town over, and the dealer all the way at the other end of the country. And we're arguably the only industry that you actually know when you go to the dealership that the dealer paid for that vehicle. So anyway, no disrespect to Ms. Foley, but I had to take that Pepsi challenge. Thanks, Madam Chair.
I don't know if it was a challenge or a plug, but we appreciate it nonetheless.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Paige Barnes with the Ferrado Company, here today on behalf of Lumen. I just want to echo the comments of my telecom colleagues and the CTIA letter, and I really appreciate the Attorney General's office for working with the industry. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jay Parmer, Jayparmer, appearing today on behalf of the Association for Accessible Medicines, the national trade organization for the generic and biosimilar pharmaceutical industry. I want to start off by thanking Attorney General Ford and his team for including us in discussions. We did transmit a letter to the Attorney General's office on Monday and shared that letter with the committee outlining some legal and policy concerns with the legislation. I did want to make a point about the reason that the industry is speaking on behalf of this bill today, and that is that this industry has worked diligently to bring cost savings to not only the state of Nevada, but across the country. In 2023, Nevada saved about $3.5 billion by utilizing generic and biosimilar medications. Generic drugs are used to fill 90% of all prescriptions currently, but represent just 13% of total spending on drugs. And today, generic and biosimilar drugs constitute just about 1.2% of total spending on health care. The bill uses terms like manipulate and deceptive that does not provide clear guidance to us on what constitutes permissible market activity. And at the same time, it does create a private right of action, creating a strong financial incentive for plaintiffs' attorneys to sue manufacturers for making decisions based on normal market activity. And I will give one example. When a generic manufacturer of a very inexpensive medication, sometimes as low as 1 cent per tablet, takes any size increase, the percentage of that increase can look very large, although it's really almost de minimis to the end consumer. The bill is proposed, in our interpretation, also is not limited to transactions that take place outside of Nevada. It appears to involve any transaction that results in a price increase regardless of decisions that are made outside of Nevada, and we did express our concerns about that. We stand ready to continue to work with the Attorney General's office as well as the legislature to understand the bill more and see if we can find some points of accommodation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to testify in opposition here in Carson City? I don't see anyone. In Las Vegas, you may begin when you're ready. Please remember to state and spell your name for the record.
Thank you, Chair Marzola and members of the committee. My name is Emily Osterberg, EMILY-OSTERBERG, and I'm here representing the Henderson Chamber of Commerce and our over 2,000 members, the majority of whom are small businesses, to express our opposition to AB 44. We would like to thank the Attorney General and his staff for meeting with stakeholders to discuss this bill, and we have seen a proposed amendment, although I don't believe we've seen the most recent version, but we do still have some concerns. While we appreciate the intent behind this bill, we fear the ambiguous language could lead to unintended consequences for smaller businesses regarding liability for prices they do not control. Additionally, the vague definition of manipulating the price of an essential good or service could lead to arbitrary enforcement, especially during times of economic fluctuation or supply chain disruptions. Businesses must adjust to market conditions, and these provisions could penalize them for responding to real-world economic factors rather than engaging in deceptive conduct. For these reasons, we're opposed to AB 44. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas? I don't see anyone. So apparently our meeting ID was incorrect, and so I'm going to read it to make sure anyone calling in is able to. Our meeting ID is 894-5400-1281. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in opposition?
Testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 44, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Again, if you wish to testify in opposition, please press star 9. Caller with the last 3 digits, 667, please press star 6 to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Mike Blank with CTIA, the Trade Association for the Wireless Industry, speaking in opposition to AB 44. We appreciate the goal of protecting consumers and understand the intent of the legislation. However, the FCC is the primary regulator of wireless carriers. It's our view that this bill seeks to regulate wireless service at the state level and thus would be in violation of federal law. Our members provide services that are inherently interstate and not amenable to state-specific regulation. Beyond this existing federal authority, the wireless industry has made public commitments related to transparency in pricing and billing to its customers as part of the consumer code for wireless services, posted publicly on CTIA's website. Further, our industry is highly competitive. Wireless companies fight every day for every consumer's business. This means lower prices even as speeds increase. Our concerns is that the amendment specifically lists telecommunications services and internet services. Regulatory certainty is important to our members, and we are seeking clear and specific language exempting services that are regulated by the FCC. Thank you very much for your time.
This is Bruce Parks, BRUCEPARKS for the record. I am speaking in opposition to this bill. This amounts to definite government overreach. I don't believe that the Attorney General's office should be in a position where they dictate market values, but that essentially is what this bill does. Additionally, if you want to look to a recent example of how this bill could impact small businesses, look no farther than the current egg debacle that we're going. Every one of the retailers that sell eggs right now would run afoul of the provisions of this bill. There are no provisions in this bill for unforeseen circumstances. And when it comes to the idea of price fixing, until I see the gas stations not colluding with one another on what they charge for gas, then we can talk about price fixing. Until then, it's just hollow language. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Chair, there are no more callers to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. We will move to neutral testimony. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to testify in neutral? Please remember to state and spell your name for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Terry Graves, representing Nevada Trucking Association. We appreciate Attorney General Ford's efforts to reach out to stakeholders. We are testifying in neutral on AB 44. Although the amendment in AB 44 presented by the Attorney General mentions ground transportation, we believe trucking industry services will not be affected due to federal presumptions. The Federal Administration Act of 1994 states a state may not enact or enforce a law related to price, route, or service of any motor carrier with respect to the transportation of property. Further, the Supreme Court in Roe versus New Hampshire Motor Transportation Association unanimously held that this preempts state regulations dictating trucking companies' rates, routes, or services. Additionally, as previously mentioned, NRS 598 Alpha .040 exempts conduct authorized or regulated by federal or state statutes, further supporting our position. We appreciate that the Attorney General has reached out to stakeholders. Further, I just note that Paulinos, the CEO of the Nevada Trucking Association, has submitted written testimony which has details to the references I've cited here. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony today. Is there anyone else in Carson City wishing to testify in neutral? I don't see anyone in Las Vegas. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in neutral?
Chair, there are no callers to testify in neutral at this time.
Thank you. We will go back to testimony in support. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line? I know we were having some issues.
There are no callers to testify in support at this time.
Thank you. AG Ford, would you like to give any final remarks?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee, and thank you so much to those who have testified. We, as always, remain open to receiving suggested amendments that will appease concerns. And in fact, Assemblymember Marzola, we will tell you which of the interest groups provide amendments that we can consider. Again, in good faith, we are willing to work with anyone. I will say that there was a bit of hyperbole in some of the testimony. The fact of the matter is we go back to the language, and it begins by saying that you have to knowingly, which is a term of art that the sophisticated actors know well because it is defined in statute and is defined in case law. We're talking about knowingly engaging in fraudulent and deceptive conduct. That's the threshold. You don't get to any question about how much the prices increase if you are not engaged in fraudulent or deceptive conduct, which, by the way, has to be intended to and does actually cause the price of essential goods to raise. It doesn't surprise me to have some to oppose. I recall during our price gouging conversation, no one even wanted to support banning price gouging during a state of emergency. So it doesn't surprise me in this instance that we'll get some comparable opposition. But what I will say to the committee is a reminder that this is a bill that outlaws fraudulent activity and deceptive activity, not innocent activity that is responsive to the basic forces of supply and demand. I will also note that this bill does not cap in any kind of way how much someone can charge for something, as long as they are not knowingly, fraudulently, and deceptively engaging in conduct. You can charge whatever you want to charge, as long as you are not knowingly, fraudulently, and deceptively engaging in conduct that intends to and does increase the price. I will note, just as a passing reference, that AT&T is indeed, just speaking to AT&T because they mentioned this out loud, is indeed regulated at the federal level, but not as to pricing. And that's the distinction that makes a big difference. This is a price-fixing bill. And so agencies like our utilities that you asked about, Assemblymember, that are regulated as to pricing are not included. But if you are regulated otherwise, but not as to pricing, you are indeed included. And for those who claim to not understand what the definition of manipulate means, again, these are sophisticated parties. They know that manipulation is defined in case law and has been redefined and reiterated through case law. And that is, frankly, something that we mentioned during the first session that we had, the working group session. So there is no confusion, not genuine confusion, around what manipulation means. And then, with all due respect, I must highlight as well, Mr. Palmer testified on behalf of the generic drugs, the pharma bill. I must say to you that we are engaged right now in litigation, multi-state litigation against generic drug manufacturers for fixing the prices of drugs that you, your constituents, your family members need. And that is something that we're engaging in right now in a statute that is much broader than the one we're talking about now. So indeed, we do think it's important for us to, especially in the day and age where we are hearing about concerns in this area, that we address it. The last thing I'll say is that it was a cute effort, but let's be clear. This is not a rent control bill. Let no one lie to you and tell you otherwise. This is a price-fixing bill that disallows knowingly engaging in fraudulent and deceptive conduct that is intended to and does cause the price of essential goods or services in the state. And if those who are renting, if corporate landlords are renting and price-fixing, we will hold them accountable. That does not mean that we are for or advocating a price control bill. We will hold you accountable for fixing prices that are artificially inflating the cost of housing to the residents of our state. There are a few additional comments that I would like my colleagues to be able to make, but wanted to make those as a preface. Thank you so much, Assemblymember.
Thank you, Chair and Assembly members. Mark Kruger for the record. I wanted to springboard off of what General Ford said. I try not to repeat too much about the knowing and deceptive and fraudulent standard, but I do want to highlight Mr. Hart's testimony. Mr. Hart's testimony is really incredible because he testified in opposition, but really what he meant and what he said was in support of this bill. And the reason I say that is because he said this would concern businesses selling the price of eggs. Sure, egg prices have gone up. There's no evidence to show that there's been a knowing and deceptive, fraudulent manipulation of the market for those egg prices. That is a classic example at this point in time, without any more evidence, of basic forces of supply and demand. So in effect, those businesses would not be affected by this bill and this legislation. Yet he went on to say, I'm concerned about fixing prices of gasoline. In fact, if there was evidence, hypothetically, to prove his statement that there was concern about a knowing, deceptive, and fraudulent act to fix gas prices, then this bill would apply as essential goods or services. So I think that's a great example of how this bill operationally works. And when you look at some of the opposition testimony, and General Ford alluded to this, is you've got a fear that it's going to impact businesses. There is no fear that it's going to impact businesses. What it does is protect those businesses. It protects corporate residents. It protects individual residents. There was a statement also in opposition about there being confusing. The terms are not vague and ambiguous. No, they're not vague and ambiguous. The definition of knowing is a standard that has been adjudicated by the courts in Nevada and other courts that discuss what knowing is in these types of situations. We all know what fraud and deception is. I know that most every one of you has been a victim of fraud and deception at one point in time. Whether or not you actually became a victim or were identified it before you became a victim remains a question. But we know what it looks like, and we know that it's prevalent, especially when it preys on Nevadans. So that leads me to the last piece, which is whether or not this standard that we have chosen by looking at the Bureau of Economic Analysis is one that is a good standard. And it's one that is a public standard, that it's an easy standard to figure out. You can go and look at these public records, which is based on analysis of spending in Nevada, and take a look at a 5-year period. That 5-year period is meant to help stabilize the amount and not and take account of those market fluctuations. So when you say, oh, the COVID is in that last 5-year period, well, number one, it's not going to be forever. It moves forward, right, every year. So you have to look back for 5 years. A look back over 5 years stabilizes that market fluctuation for things like COVID or other fuel spikes or anything else that you might think of. There were a couple other comments that were discussed as well regarding the terms and some concerns about whether or not there was a legal basis for it. To be clear, it is regulating the price for essential goods or services in this state. And if we need to make further amendment to make that clear that it's in this state, and we're not looking to go and regulate or look at the essential goods and services of another state, that's something certainly that would be opening to making an amendment to ensure that's absolutely clear and alleviates that concern. And then finally, I was going to touch on, and General Ford touched on, the deregulation of the telecom industry in 2007 shows you a good example of how a regulated agency may not be regulated as to certain prices. And so therefore this bill would have an effect on making sure that there wasn't fraudulent, deceptive, and knowing conduct in that particular industry. And then there are a few other comments that we can certainly be happy to work with stakeholders on regarding private right of action, things of that nature. We'd be happy to continue those discussions. Thank you.
Aaron Ford, for the record, I forgot one thing, a very key important thing. We'll get rid of the private right of action. We'll remove that from the bill if they're concerned about a private right of action. And it sounded like a couple of them were raised to it. We will leave this to the enforcement of the Attorney General office and remove the private right of action. Let's see how many folks that appeases.
Thank you, Attorney General. I'm glad that conversations are ongoing and everyone's coming to the table. I believe that the best legislation is passed that way. Thank you for being with us today. I will now close the hearing on Assembly Bill 44. 1 minute recess. Back to order. I will now open a hearing on Assembly Bill 52. This measure revises provisions relating to the payment of claims under policies of health insurance. You may begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon. Gabriela Wyatt for the record, Gabriela, Wyatt, Wyett. Thank you, Majority Leader Hedegui. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. On behalf of the Nevada Commission on Minority Affairs, we thank you for providing us an opportunity to discuss this bill and the purpose behind it. Fundamentally, this bill seeks to lessen the time periods in which doctors receive reimbursement from private insurers for care rendered to Nevada patients. It does this by reducing the time in which private insurer has to approve or deny a claim received electronically from 30 to 15 days, and the time in which the payment on an approved claim from 30 to 15 days. With the advent of electronic claim submission and payment, we don't believe the extended delay in processing of claims is any longer necessary. As you may be aware, the Nevada Commission on Minority Affairs is tasked with being the central advisory body, coordinating discussion, studies affecting our BIPOC communities in Nevada, and affecting change and impact through legislation. Excuse me. The premise of this bill blossomed from a personal experience. Although I am a very private person, to influence change, I must share a small part of my life journey. My children and I fled a domestic violence situation over 4 years ago. Throughout the first 2 years, we struggled with housing and ended up losing health care benefits. Because of the kindness and grace of a doctor, he treated my kids while they were extremely sick due to lack of resources. Through conversation, he mentioned the delay in pay from insurance carriers and discussed how his colleagues were leaving to more affluent areas and leaning into concierge services. This exodus creates healthcare deserts precisely in communities where residents already struggle with transportation barriers and endure hours-long waits for basic care. The consequences of this systemic failure is affecting our vulnerable communities in Nevada. Families like mine find themselves in impossible situations, choosing between seeking necessary medical care and meeting other basic needs, all while navigating a system that continues to contract rather than expand. I'm a conduit. I'm in an appointed position to help Nevadans understand the difficulties to accessibility. I take my duties and responsibilities extremely serious. I come before our assembly not as an expert in policy or law, but as someone who has lived in the gaps of our healthcare system and who now serves as a commissioner dedicated to bridging those gaps. The delay in insurance reimbursements is devastating and disproportionately affecting accessibility to healthcare in our BIPOC communities. With the additional assistance of subject matter experts and policy experts, we have been able to bring AB 52 to life. This has been a labor of love, diligently working with my fellow Commissioner Juani Romero, who chairs the Legislative Committee, to bring this bill before you. I'd like to especially thank Majority Leader Hedegui for her support and appearance today in presenting this important bill to the committee. We need our doctors. Nevada's healthcare system is fractured. We're challenged with keeping and recruiting doctors, and more so in certain demographics. It is a rippling effect, and moving this bill forward will provide some relief and help our medical community, and hopefully expand healthcare availability to underserved communities. While we believe the lead time in doctors receiving prompt reimbursement impacts certain communities, this issue does affect all doctors and patients in Nevada. Doctors who encounter delays in receiving payment for services provided make it more difficult for them to practice in Nevada as a whole. The struggles Nevada has with recruiting and retaining doctors as well is well documented. Every Nevadan who has had to seek care realizes the delays and difficulty in getting to see a doctor. We think this small step can facilitate some ease for our doctors to practice in Nevada, making it more likely for doctors to come and remain in the state. I thank you all for providing me an opportunity to share our story and the purpose behind this bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair Marzola and members of the committee. I'm Assemblymember Sandra Howdigi, and I proudly represent Assembly District 41. I'm presenting Assembly Bill 52, commonly known as Prompt Pay Law, alongside the Nevada Commission on Minority Affairs. I would like to thank Commissioner Wyatt for being here today and for sharing her personal story. This is a very important bill and hearing for the medical profession, and I want to start by thanking the committee for hearing this bill. Over the 21-22 interim and during the 23 legislative session, I worked on a few bills that were aimed at addressing the healthcare workforce shortage in Nevada. And I did so because my constituents would tell me at the door that they would have to wait months to see their doctor. It's no secret that we have a shortage of doctors, of nurses, of mental health professionals, you name it, and we fall short of those providers. The bill you have before you will not only enhance the financial stability of our healthcare providers, but also improve access to quality care for our residents. By ensuring that physicians are reimbursed promptly, we create a more supportive environment for medical professionals, encouraging them to practice in Nevada, and ultimately strengthening our healthcare system. This bill is about making Nevada one of the most attractive places for doctors to practice, especially brand new doctors who can't afford to keep the overhead that longer established doctors can sometimes carry. Nevada has existing provisions imposing a series of requirements and penalties intended to ensure that healthcare professionals and insureds are paid in a timely fashion. So this isn't a new concept. Currently, administrators of health insurance plans and certain health insurers, including our very own Public Employees Benefit Program, PEB, must approve or deny claims within 30 days after the insurer receives the claim. If the administrator or insurer approves the claim must be paid within 30 days after the claim is approved. And in an administrator or insurer that fails to pay a claim within the required time period must pay interest on the claim at a prescribed rate. I use PEB as an example to show that statutory prompt payment timelines are not new to Nevada. They already exist. Georgia also participates in prompt pay laws. Under Georgia state law, insurers must process payments within 15 working days after receiving clean claims or face penalties of up to 18% of the benefit due. The state's insurance commissioner has been steadfast in enforcing this law when necessary, but insurers have complied without undue financial burden. With your permission, Chair, I would now like to walk the committee through the bill and the conceptual amendment that was provided to you and is on NALIS. Okay. Section 1 requires the Division of Insurance of the Department of Business and Industry to establish and carry out a campaign to inform healthcare providers and insureds under health insurance policies of certain information relating to the payment of claims. It also establishes a program to provide additional support and resources to help healthcare providers who operate newly opened or small healthcare practices in navigating the process for seeking reimbursement. And it ensures insurers comply with the timely processing of insurance claims. Sections 2, 5, 8 through 11, 14, 16, 20, and 22 replace the existing claim repayment requirements with uniform time period requirements of health insurance providers. The initial draft of Assembly Bill 52 applies to administrators of health insurance plans and all public and private health insurers, including Medicaid, insurance for employees of local governments, and the Public Employees Benefit Program. However, upon working with stakeholders, including Clark County and the Professional Firefighters of Nevada, the legislation, as amended by the conceptual amendment, would not apply to self-managed insurers or employee programs. This is specifically Section 1 of the conceptual amendment. It is also our intent to address the bill's application to the Medicaid program in a future amendment. The presented conceptual amendment further changes the number of days to deny a claim from working days to consecutive days. This is specifically referenced in Section 2 of the conceptual amendment. Assembly Bill 52, with the proposed conceptual amendment, would require each administrator or insurer to approve or deny a claim, and if the claim is approved, pay the claim within 15 days of receiving the claim if the claim is submitted electronically. If the claim is not submitted electronically, they have 30 days after receiving the claim to pay the claim. An administrator or insurer that needs additional information to determine whether to approve or deny a claim must request such information within 20 days of receiving the claim. If, after receiving such additional information, the administrator or insurer approves the claim must again be paid within 15 days if it is received electronically, or 30 days if it is received not electronically. Sections 2, 6, 7, 9, 10, 12, 14, 15, 17, 18, 20, and 22 require private health insurers to provide notice of the denial of a claim within 30 days after receiving all information necessary to make a determination. Sections 10, 14, and 16 make the requirements governing the payments of claims that currently apply to most health insurers to also apply to fraternal benefit societies, organizations for dental care, and managed care organizations. So the requirements governing the payments of claims are uniform for all health insurers. And it allows the commissioner to impose an administrative penalty upon determining an administrator of a health insurance plan or certain health insurers are not in substantial compliance with the schedule for paying claims. Section 19 makes a conforming change to require the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services to administer the provisions of Section 22 in the same manner as other provisions governing Medicaid. Section 4 requires a healthcare carrier that offers or issues a network plan to include an efficient process by which a participating healthcare provider may challenge a denial of a claim by a health carrier. Madam Chair, the proposed conceptual amendment before you also seeks to insert a new section after Section 24 that reads, "Nothing in this bill is intended to interfere with, supersede, or affect an insured's right as provided for under federal law, Title 57, including NRS Chapter 686A, NRS 695G, and NAC Chapter 686A, the contract or common law, including the implied covenant of good faith or fair dealing." The purpose of this additional language is to clarify the scope of the legislation. I would also like to note that we have heard from representatives from some health insurers about concerns regarding some disclosures required on their part under certain provisions of the bill, and we are prepared to work with those parties to address the concerns prior to moving forward with this bill. And Chair, with that, I do have my phone a friend, Mr. Ed Garcia, here, and we are now ready for questions.
Thank you, Majority Leader Jauregui. Committee members, are there any questions? Assemblymember O'Neill.
I'll make this quick and easy. I like the working days. You've pulled that out in your amendment. And the reason why I say that 15 working days, when you put a holiday in and up north, maybe a snow event, you're really cutting down the ability of the insurance company to pay. I guess I'm just asking, what was the reasoning going from working to days, period?
Thank you, Assemblymember O'Neill. Ed Garcia for the record. That was a request by some of the stakeholders who came back and they said for purposes of clarity and consistency that they would like to see it be simply calendar days, because I think working days can be confusing some, and I know it's something we've always dealt with here in Nevada in the past, and but that was something that they'd asked us for to put in there.
May I just follow up? When you say the stakeholders, was that the insurance companies or the patients asking for that clarification? Which stakeholders?
Once again, Assemblymember Ed Garcia for the record. That was from a couple doctors and some other folks who had just weighed in and said, we're just offering their comments, and we said that is certainly something that we were not certainly wedded to at any point, so we decided to go ahead and implement that change.
I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Assemblymember Kasama.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Leader, for submitting this really important bill. It's just such a great bill to protect our Nevada citizens. And I've also submitted a bill called I call it the prior authorization bill, and this is the prompt payment bill. So we have the same thinking here. My thoughts on this was it looks like the insured has up to 30 days to approve the claim or deny it. My question is, one, could we consider perhaps, and I don't know because I know there's so much paperwork and so many people involved, but is there a way to perhaps tighten that time frame for life-threatening treatments? 30 days could be a mistreatment that could frankly make the difference between life or death. And so is there any way that could be considered in this language? And then also I had visited with some providers where they had received an authorization for treatment. And then once they started the treatment, the insurer came back and then revoked the approval. And it seems to me that if we could have in here that once it has been granted and people have started with treatment, you cannot revoke the approval. Those are just two additional things that I was considering that would be great to have it considered in this bill as well.
Thank you, Assemblymember Kasama. Once again, Ed Garcia for the record. Certainly that's something we're happy to discuss and work through. There's a lot of time frames on here and there are a lot of moving pieces, but absolutely that's something that we would happy to talk to the proponents and see if there was something that we could accommodate.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
And Assemblymember Howdiggy for the record. And the language as written, Assemblymember, requires the insurer to approve or deny a claim within 15 days if the claim is received electronically, and only then if they need more information does it give the additional 20 days, which would make it over the 35, but happy to work on any recommendations.
Thank you.
Assemblymember Yurick.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm going to echo the sentiments of my colleague. I think it's a great bill. And hearing from a lot of my providers, they agree this is a great thing. One of the concerns that I have, I'm always thinking about the potential unintended consequences of this, right? And you had mentioned that there's jurisdictions that have enacted these sorts of prompt pay provisions into their state law. Have we seen at all, or is there any concern that insurers under this new obligation and some of the increased administrative burdens might increase their denials? Have we seen any connection with denial rates that then gives them more time to kind of figure things out? I just was curious if that has ever been an issue, if there's a concern that that could potentially be a problem.
Thank you, Assemblymember Yurick. No, and I think some of these are relatively recent, so I don't know, maybe that data may occur and there might be some of our healthcare providers and healthcare associations who might be able to provide you that information. But we can certainly get back to you on that and see if there is any evidence of that.
Any additional questions, committee members? I don't see any. Thank you for a great presentation. If you guys can just step back so we can start taking testimony in support of Assembly Bill 52. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to testify in support? Please remember to state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Diego Trujillo. That's D-I-E-G-O, T-R-U-J-I-L-L-O. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues, healthcare professionals, and esteemed guests. I stand before you today not just as CEO of Las Vegas Heals, but as someone who's lived, worked, and served in this community my entire life. I was born here in Las Vegas and grew up in the Valley, surrounded by the people and places that make this city what it is. I've seen firsthand the challenges that our healthcare providers face and the resilience they show every day in caring for our community. I founded a group called Vegas Healthcare in 2016, a group that has now grown to over 18,000 healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, first responders, and administrators, coming together to support one another and push for meaningful change. I'm also here as the CEO of Las Vegas Heals, the largest healthcare coalition in Southern Nevada, advocating for policies that strengthen our healthcare system, protect our providers, and ensure better outcomes for patients. And that's why I'm here today, to express my full support for Assembly Bill 52, a bill that will not only protect Nevada's healthcare providers, but will also create a stronger, more reliable healthcare system for every patient in our state. From the beginning, working with the Minority Commission, I've sought to strengthen the medical community and really support the providers that are out there in the field every day taking care of patients. This legislation offers a pivotal opportunity to advance our mission by supporting Assembly Bill 52, a legislative proposal that's designed to strengthen Nevada's prompt payment laws. This bill is not just a regulatory enhancement, it's a commitment to our healthcare providers and ultimately to the patients they serve and the access to care they need. Timely reimbursements is the lifeblood of any healthcare system. When providers face delays in payments, it hampers their ability to invest in essential resources, adopt innovative technologies, and more critically, deliver uninterrupted patient care. AB 52 aims to rectify these challenges by enforcing stricter deadlines for claim approvals and payments, imposing penalties for noncompliance, and standardizing requirements across all insurers in the state. Such measures are essential to ensure that our healthcare providers can focus on what they do best, which is caring for our communities. The positive impact of bills like this have been seen in Texas and Washington, where strong regulations have improved payment timelines for healthcare providers. And by enacting AB 52, Nevada has a chance to join the ranks of states to prioritize the financial stability of healthcare providers and the well-being of patients.
Sir, can I have you wrap up your comments, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you for your dedication, your passion, and your commitment to advancing healthcare in our great state. Together we can make a difference.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Leah Cartwright, LEACARTWRIGHT, here today on behalf of NAMI Nevada, the National Alliance on Mental Illness Nevada chapter, in support because AB 52, with its prompt payment feature, will likely encourage more providers to come here to the great state of Nevada, as my colleague next to me mentioned. We have been following the Nevada Commission on Minority Affairs for the entire interim and are very excited to continue the support of the bill here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Marzola, Vice Chair Hadigi, and members of the Assembly Commerce and Labor Committee. My name is Jacqueline Nguyen, Nguyen, and I represent the Nevada State Medical Association, the oldest and largest organization representing physicians in our great state. Thank you. First, we appreciate the amendments being brought forth on the bill, correcting the timelines. And also, we really would like to thank the Nevada Commission on Minority Affairs for bringing forth this important bill. Prompt payment by payers to physicians is critical. My physicians in private practice are small businesses that depend on prompt payments to maintain their practice cash flow, to pay their staff, rent, utilities, and to buy medical supplies for the practice. For my oncology doctors, it's crucial for them to purchase and stock necessary medication for patients for treatment. A good example of what happens when practice cash flows are disrupted was seen last February with the Change Healthcare situation. That catastrophic event caused months of unprecedented outages and widespread disruption across U.S. healthcare sectors. Thousands of physician practices were hurt, especially those that were small private practices. During this time, many physicians used their personal funds to pay staff, pay rent, pay utilities. Some practices even closed as a direct result of the practice cash flow disruptions. Given the ongoing challenges of lower reimbursement rates for our physicians and higher operating costs, the financial margins for physician small practices continue to shrink. This makes timely payments even more critical, and for that reason, we're fully in support. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony today. Is there anyone else in Carson City wishing to testify in support? I don't see anyone. I don't see anyone in Las Vegas broadcast. Is there anyone on the line?
Here, there are no callers that are testifying in support at this time.
Thank you. We will move to testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 52. Is there anyone here in Carson City? Don't see anyone. I still don't see anyone in Las Vegas broadcast. Is there anyone on the line?
Chair, there are no callers to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. We will move to testimony in neutral. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in neutral to Assembly Bill 52? Please remember to state and spell your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Ryan Beeman, representing the professional firefighters in Nevada. Last name is B-E-A-M-A-N. Just want to say thank you. We came up in neutral, and the stakeholders working with us to address our concerns for our self-funded plans that we administer ourselves. Just want to say thank you for them to working with us and addressing those concerns. With the amendment, we'll be able to change to support. Thank you.
Hello, committee. Ashley Kennedy, for the record, representing Clark County, spelled K-E-N-N-E-D-Y. I'll diddle to what Mr. Beeman had just mentioned. We are in neutral with the amendment and appreciate the bill sponsor for working with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Marzola, members of the committee. Paul Young, on behalf of Nevada Association of Health Plans. We are currently neutral. Appreciate the Majority Leader Howdigi working with us. Look forward to continue working with her and think we'll probably be able to get there on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam Plain, Nevada Division of Insurance, for the record. If I could beg the chair's indulgence to maybe exceed the 2 minutes by a slight amount. I did want to talk first about the division's fiscal note. We have an undetermined fiscal note on this bill at this time, mostly pertaining to Section 1. Frankly, the division just is not structured and staffed to do the kind of outreach that is required under Section 1. We don't know what the scope of such outreach should be per the legislative intent. It could be as simple as a posting on our website and an email, which would cost the division practically nothing. Or if we need to hire another public information officer, go on tour, have in-person training sessions, have additional staff to answer questions from providers, that could cost a considerable amount more. So I can definitely work with Majority Leader Howdigi and the Nevada Minority Affairs Commission to sort out what they'd like to see from the division. Then, with your indulgence, I just wanted to address a couple of the questions that members of the committee had. Assemblymember Kasama had questions about, for example, life-threatening situations and how language might be incorporated. I do want to clarify that typically the prompt payment statute kicks in after a service has been provided, and the medical provider is now billing the insurer for the cost of that service. So changes to the prompt payment statute in most cases should not affect whether a life-threatening or life-saving procedure is undertaken. Assemblymember Urick had a question about whether prompt pay statutes would maybe accelerate the increase in denial rate for procedures. I can double check with our national association to see what other states have experienced. It's my understanding that increasing the prompt payment timeframe does not directly lead to an increase in denial rates. And if the committee has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
We don't have any questions, and if the committee members do have questions, if you can take it offline. I appreciate you answered those questions, and you were actually right on time. Is there anyone else that wishes to testify in neutral? Still don't see anyone in Las Vegas broadcast. Is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in neutral to Assembly Bill 52?
Chair, there are no callers to testify in neutral at this time.
Thank you. I want to go back to testimony in support in case, due to the phone line issue, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in support?
Chair, there are no callers to testify in support at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner White, Majority Leader Howdigi, or Mr. Garcia, would you like to give any closing remarks?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to present Assembly Bill 52. I just wanted to thank the committee for hearing the bill and let the committee know that I will be working closely with the Insurance Commissioner to get that undetermined fiscal note down to 0.
Gabriela Wyatt, for the record, just wanted to thank all the members of the Assembly. Thank you so much for listening to us.
Thank you for such a great presentation and bill, and this is not the fiscal committee. I will now close the hearing on Assembly Bill 52. I will now open the hearing on Assembly Bill 270. This measure revises provisions relating to professional engineers and land surveyors.
Good afternoon, Chair, Assembly members. Good to see everyone this afternoon. Still afternoon. Good. Good to see everyone. Happy to be here to present Assembly Bill 270. For the record, Gregory Hafen II, representing Assembly District 36. I am the sponsor of AB 270, which revises provisions related to professional engineers and land surveyors. Joining me today is Mark Fackler, the Executive Director of the Nevada Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. Mr. Fackler has over 32 years of experience as a licensed professional civil engineer working on master plan communities, large residential and commercial projects. A little background information. I'm going to call it the board because it's really long. The board was created by the legislature March 29, 1919. The legislature added land surveyors in 1947. The board oversees the licensure and regulations of over 22,000 professionals, 16,000 actively practicing in Nevada across 16 engineering disciplines and land surveying. The board is made up of 9 board members. They convene 12 board meetings per year. And then, if I may, I want to get into some of the proposed changes to the statute. The first change is to reduce the waiting period for waiving the fundamentals to engineering or fundamentals of surveying exam from 15 years to 8 years, which I believe there is an amendment that has been uploaded to Nellis to amend the proposal from 8 years to 10 years. The second change is a housekeeping to reflect current land surveyors' practices. As I stated earlier, the original board was created in 1919, and the land surveyor portion was 1947, so much needed to update in the last 100+ years. Number 1, reduction of the waiting period for the FEE exams and FS exams. That provision of 15 years was adopted back in 1997 at a time when Nevada had multiple pathways to licensures, including a pathway for non-degree applicants. In 2010, Nevada eliminated these pathways and required a 4-year degree for licensure. The board believes the current 15-year experience requirement for waiving the fundamentals of engineers and fundamentals for surveying exams compelled the statutory education required to be unnecessary, lengthy, and is proposing now with the amendment to go from 15 years to 10 years. The second is housekeeping to reflect the current land surveyors' licensing practices. The board proposes to remove obsolete language about exam content and the administrative and licensing requirement. Engineering and land surveying exams are developed and administered by the nationally by the National Council of Examiners for Engineers and Land Surveyors, and exams can be taken at any time without board approval. I believe these are all done online now or electronically. I'll let Mark touch that just real quick. These proposed housekeeping changes align with the current national exam and licensing practices. Having said that, I'll let Mark Fackler add to that.
Thank you, Chair. Mark Fackler for the record, M-A-R-K-F-A-K-L-E-R. Yeah, it's all computer-based testing, and these tests are administered by NCES. That's short for the National Council of Examiners for Engineers and Land Surveyors. And so they contract with these testing centers so applicants can sign up and take these tests whenever they need.
Does that end your presentation?
That ends our presentation. We are here for any questions that the board might have.
Thank you. Committee members, are there any questions? Assemblymember O'Neill.
Thank you. I have a question. On the reduction in time, why the 8 years and not 5 years? I was looking to become a cardiologist after medical school. Takes three years in residency, then 3 years in a fellowship. And so they're at 6 years, and nothing against, but your 8 years, your 15 years, I agree, is excessive. But how did you end up with the 8 instead of, like I said, you look at a cardiologist, is it 6 years before they can put out their shingle for it?
Through you, Chair, to Assemblymember O'Neill.
You can go direct.
Gregory Hafen for the record. Great question, Assemblymember. I asked the same question when developing the language and working with the board, because to me, I was like, well, we're only doing the 4 years. That's the current practice for land surveyors. Why don't we just do the same thing for the engineers? In talking to some of our fellow members, as well as the board, there was some life safety concerns when it comes to stamping the plans. You start looking at the high-rise casinos in Las Vegas and these individuals stamping these plans. There was a feeling that to go to 4 or 5 years, like you had suggested, was not going to give them enough time for the life safety issues and the concerns. And so we were amenable to the 10-year proposed amendment. Having said that, I do not disagree with you that we could have done less. However, as we all know, this building is filled with compromise to come up with the best possible solution for our constituents. And so that is where we have left it. Thank you.
I'd be careful about talking about this building considering the leaks we've had over the years in its construction. But thank you, Chair. I appreciate the response. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Committee members, any additional questions? I don't see any. And thank you for bringing up that cardiologist example, because it is 4 years of medical school and then 3 years of residency, and then you usually have a fellowship after that. And before even getting to medical school, you have 4 years of undergrad that you usually will have a major and usually a minor having to do with science classes. So there's a lot of training that goes on. So thank you for changing from 8 to 10. I think a lot of us feel a lot more comfortable with that. And with that, we will start taking support testimony if your presentation has concluded. We will now take support testimony to Assembly Bill 270. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in support? I don't see anyone. I don't see anyone in Las Vegas. Broadcast, is there anybody on the line?
If you would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 270, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Again, if you wish to testify in support, please press star 9. Chair, we have no callers choosing to testify in support at this time.
Thank you. We will move to testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 270. Is there anyone here in Carson City? I don't see anyone. I don't see anyone in Las Vegas. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line?
To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 270, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits. You may begin.
Hi, my name is DeAndre Carruthers. My name is spelled D-E-A-N-D-R-E. Last name is Carruthers, C-A-R-U-T-H-E-R-S. I represent the Las Vegas City Employees Association. We are against this bill because we believe that this waters down the profession and it's allowing unqualified candidates to do this position. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Chair, we have no more callers choosing to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. We will move to neutral testimony. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in neutral? I don't see anyone. I don't see anyone in Las Vegas. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line?
To testify in neutral to Assembly Bill 270, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers choosing to testify in neutral at this time.
Thank you. Assembly member, would you like to give any final remarks?
Chair, Assembly members, just want to say thank you very much for the time allowing us to come and present. Greatly appreciate all of the feedback that we have to get to this point with the proposed amendment, so thank you.
Thank you. I will now close the hearing on Assembly Bill 270. I will now open up for public comment. Please address your remarks to issues that fall within the jurisdiction of this committee. Public comment is limited to 2 minutes per person. Please remember to state and spell your name for the record. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to give public comment? I don't see anyone in Las Vegas. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line?
If you would like to make public comment, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers choosing to give public comment at this time.
Thank you. This will conclude our meeting for today. Our next meeting is Friday, March 7th. This meeting's adjourned, or I should have.